Right. The Anatomy of Emotions. Well, The Anatomy of Emotions was something of a breakthrough album for me. It was the first album of mine where I predominantly played live, and it was the album in a way that taught me to mix live music and words and perhaps explore the bridge between poetry and song lyrics, a bridge which I think no longer exists. I think that some people think there's a difference between poetry and song lyrics, but I think there isn't. It's simply words and simply music. The album started in 2015 with a live performance, a collaboration with artist Sabine Kussmaul. And I'd collaborated with Sabine a few times in Macclesfield in a studio space. We had some sort of special art jam with loads of artists where it was a mix of music. We had musical instruments. I brought my piano along, my digital piano, and live drawing to music and projection. And so it was an experimental performance event. And this eventually led to a few other things, but we were eventually invited to perform something in a place called the Tabernacle in Notting Hill to open an art exhibition. I invited artist Escargot, a French artist from my art group here, to write some words. So Escargot wrote some stream of consciousness words, random little stories. I remember one was called the Society Sous-Marine, the underwater society. And I played music along to her words, and the music wasn't particularly music, it was more like sound effects. So when she mentioned waves, I might move up and down the piano in a wave-like way. And most of the things I was playing were more based on things that were in the story or the feelings of the story. There was no musical structure, no melody at all to any of this, which itself was a new thing for me. But as I could barely play the piano, it was also the best I could do at the time. And Sabine developed some projections that went approximately with the stories. So for the Underwater Society, she might have developed some waves and bubbles and that sort of thing. And the performance went fine. It lasted about half an hour. But then Escargot wasn't particularly comfortable with the whole idea of live performance. So we eventually found another collaborator to continue the project. And that's when the poet Tim Watson became involved. And we decided to develop away from completely random surrealism into something that had more an idea behind it, and that's when The Anatomy of Emotions changed into something specifically about emotional states.
You move seemingly without effort, grace abounding, delicate, provocative. My eyes are trapped, caught in spotlights. Each step defined and laid out one before another. You move and sway, step by step.
We developed 6 pieces. Tim worked on the words. We came up with an idea, such as memory. Tim would then use this single word memory to write a poem about memory. I would write a piece of music about memory, this time much more melodic. So I would think of things like repetition and various things. And then Sabine would make a video about memory. And so we would all three work on a piece of about 3 minutes that would was associated with this word. And then the idea is we would show them all simultaneously. I would play music, Tim would read out the words, Sabine would show the projection. And we did this for 6 different key words or phrases. And it worked remarkably well. It's amazing how closely the music and the words and the video works together, despite the fact they were all developed completely independently.
I found you all in a box of yellow papers. You, this collection of portraits, taken 70, 80, 90, perhaps 100 years ago. All of you left forgotten in a box. There seemed to be no family resemblance, and perhaps no family members left to care about your whereabouts, or the 80p price on each of your heads. 7 of you for £5, the lady said, sat behind the makeshift 70s Formica kitchen counter. Money was exchanged, and no receipt given.
We performed it a few times. It's still the same year, all in 2015. We did it at the Warrington Contemporary Arts Festival. I think we did 2 performances in Warrington. And we even performed it on Crewe railway station at some point, which was fun. Because they used to have a room with a piano in, which I think they still do. But now I think it's a designated special waiting room. And then we came to developing the actual album, and so I wanted to put together an album. I thought it'd be good to record what we'd done and try to capture what we'd done. And I think one thing that made it different for me is that all my previous albums have been heavily composed, pre-prepared and sequenced, but for this one it was heavily live music. Some of the tracks I completely improvised. Tracks like Meeting Eno or Forever Spring, I essentially felt the emotion and then expressed what I was feeling through the piano. And that's something I learnt from the experience of playing along to those random words, that in music there are no mistakes. You can just play what you feel, however you're feeling at the moment. And if you're sitting in front of the piano, you express your feelings through the instrument there and then. And in those circumstances, you can't fail. And that's essentially how I learned to play the piano. I just wanted to feel the emotion and feel the melody I wanted to express, and then just let it go. And at that point, everything is correct. Before the Anatomy of Emotions, I'd hardly ever touched the piano. I'd had a keyboard for many years, over decades, but I'd never played it correctly or properly. I'd never used both hands simultaneously. It was a case of just using one finger. When performing the Love Symphony, I just used one finger to play a single melody. But within 6 months of the Anatomy of Emotions performance, I was playing far better. And in fact, on the Anatomy of Emotions album, there were a few tracks that I composed and performed specifically because I wanted to test my practicing skills a little bit. It was also the second album that I had commercially replicated. So I based all the artwork on the poster designs, which were a rough, flaky sort of design, and I hid lots of faces and things inside them to indicate the emotions. As I said, there were only 6 tracks in the initial performance, but I needed to expand this. So also when it came to recording the CD, I thought it would be good to have Tim's words as separate tracks, because in the live performance it's piano with Tim's words on top. But I thought it would be good if we had Tim's words, piano, Tim's words, piano, so that you could hear both completely independently. And of course, you can always combine the two if you could play two things simultaneously. And well, that's a brief history of the Anatomy of Emotions. But it certainly led to a radical change in direction for me musically, because I started to incorporate a lot more words into my music, and I also started to understand I like the idea of spoken word and music. So things like Falling Green would never have happened without the Anatomy of Emotions. And Tim eventually, very quickly, within a year, moved to the other side of the country. So that sort of ended the live performance of that particular show. But I collaborated with Sabine several times, and this eventually led to, well, partly we kept doing a show in Macclesfield every month for about 2 years or 3 years. But we eventually made a second show of projection and music, this time without the words. It was me playing the piano, 2 live projection. That was called Cycles, which has only been performed once so far in Chester Cathedral, but that led to the Cycles and Shadows album. So I suppose for me, the 2 biggest things the Anatomy of Emotions gave me were piano itself. I fell in love with playing the piano and really liked the idea of live performance of an instrument for the first time. Before that, it was all pre-sequenced. After that, it's all live. And secondly, a mix of words and music, which always works. You always express unique and different things when you combine the two. And this showed, particularly with the experimental first bits and later on as well, it showed that you can combine any words and any music, and it always creates a unique feeling. The words don't have to fit the music at all. It doesn't have to be a song lyric. You don't have to completely repeat words. You don't have to completely repeat music. Both contemporary poetry and music were somehow linked, and I could see how one thing could lead to another.